There's a tip of the iceberg, which is we're designing with living systems and to address biodiversity and climate challenges, where we have the opportunity to build from scratch. There's an opportunity to think about what else needs to be true, such that biotech isn't just about materials, it's about human and planetary flourishing.
Steve Jobs perfectly described the creative process when he said, "Creativity is just connecting the dots." Innovation and new ideas are often found by combining the familiar in new ways. Natsai Audrey Chieza, founder of Faber Futures, is doing just that.
Natsai started her education as an architect, became fascinated by materials and transferred into biology, and today is designing new textiles, design processes, and manufacturing methods by harnessing biological technology. She's a rare individual who can hop between disciplines to design in new ways.
We talked to Natsai about the work that she and her team at Faber Futures are doing to help governments and large organizations design more sustainable products using bacteria, fungi, and algae as building tools, and how biophilic design technology could help us address climate change.
This is Design Better, where we explore creativity at the intersection of design and technology. I'm Eli Woolery.
And I'm Aaron Walter. To learn more about the benefits of being a premium Design Better subscriber, visit designbetterpodcast.com/subscribe. We'll return to the conversation after this quick break. As a Design Better listener, we think you'll enjoy Tools and Weapons. It's a podcast hosted by Microsoft's Vice Chair and President, Brad Smith. Brad's conversations with leaders at the intersection of the promise and perils of the digital age touch on some fascinating topics, like the new AI economy and how AI is becoming a tool in the battle against hunger. On a recent episode, Brad was taken to Venice, Italy, where he connected with Yves Ubelmannhoff of Iconum. It's a startup that specializes in 3D digitization of endangered cultural heritage sites. During the relative quiet of the pandemic, Yves and his team used drone capture photography and some powerful AI tools to create a full-scale digital twin of Venice, a city threatened by climate change and over-tourism. How cool is that? On Tools and Weapons, Yves tells Brad how he's using this incredible technology to help preserve some of the world's most endangered cultural heritage sites in pristine detail so they can be studied and appreciated for generations to come. To stay current on some of the most innovative people working with AI today, you should subscribe to Tools and Weapons with Brad Smith, wherever finer podcasts are served. And now, back to the show. Natsai Audrey Chieza, welcome to Design Better.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are doing super interesting work at your company, Faber Futures. And what's fascinating to us is it seems like what you're doing is designing the future and designing in a new way where biology, technology come together to create, textiles and really interesting things. But you've got a background in architecture, which we found unexpected given the type of work that you're doing. Tell us a little bit about how you went from architecture to what you're doing.
It's funny you say that because I feel like I encounter along my journey, or have encountered along my journey, so many architects who are not practicing architecture.
That is true. That is true. My wife included.
That's a real thing. I know you had Paola Antonelli on, and she talked about this as well. And I do think that there's something there. I studied architecture in Edinburgh for 4 years, and on completing my sort of part one, as it's structured in the UK, I decided to shift to a different kind of scale of inquiry. And so I enrolled at Central St. Martin's Textile Futures at the time. That's what it was called. But now it's called Material Futures. And it was a fascinating course because it was inviting you to consider materiality from the perspective of technology and culture. And so sort of built into it was this assumption that you were going to find a technological context to really work and hands-on with different kinds of materials. And so I became really fascinated with biotechnology at the time, I think because on the most part, there was maybe a saturation of projects in the digital space, and it felt new and undefined and a new territory where you could really have a rich level of inquiry.
Was there a moment or moments in your journey where you encountered these new technologies and thought, wow, this could be the future of textile design, or this could be the future of many different disciplines, and within 5 to 10 years it'll be common to do this, but right now there's an opportunity to kind of define the field and be a pioneer in the space?
They were, and I mean, there were a few really good examples of practitioners kind of moving in that space. My course director at the time was developing her academic research practice in this field, so it was nice to have a bit of a beacon there to say, hey, there's something here, it's quite rich. But I wanted to get my hands dirty in many ways. And so the first encounter that I had, I think that was pivotal, was for my thesis project. I reached out to a professor in synthetic biology. His name is John Ward at University College London's Biochem Engineering Department. And he very much humored my curiosity and allowed me to tinker in his lab and understand what is biotechnology, like what is a microbe? How do you grow a microbe? And why would you want to do that? Really it's first principles things. But we ended up collaborating for over 7 years, focused on one particular microbe, a pigment-producing bacteria that we developed a protocol to dye textiles with. And I created my design practice on the basis of this organism, and that first sort of foot in the door into this lab environment through John Ward's generosity. And bearing in mind that at the time, there was no funding for that kind of work. There was no precedent for it. It was literally down to him as an individual being curious and perhaps old school enough to understand the value of allowing a non-affiliated random person into his lab to ask different kinds of questions and hopefully not break anything. So I, really worked with this organism to understand the shape of the future of materiality, and along the way developed new networks and contexts to create the work that led me to different spaces all around the world, connecting with like-minded people who were maybe working in different use cases for biotech, but certainly there was a real strong sense of community, these outliers who were feeling for something on the edge. And the second encounter that I had, I think that was really pivotal, was in 2017, where I spent 5 months at a then biotech startup in Boston called Ginkgo Bioworks, where I collaborated with their creative team to develop my own work there, but to also create the basis of a creative residency that would allow more people like me to have access to this space. And why it was really important for me that more people like me have access to this space was because it was mind-blowing arriving there and really seeing into the future of this field, not from an academic lab environment sort of perspective, which is one way of understanding what was at play, but from the commercial aspect. Here was Ginkgo fundraising to build platform technologies to make biology easier to engineer. And I'd spent most of my time being able to see the biology I was working with, but at Ginkgo, of course, you couldn't see it because it was just a bunch of robots moving liquid from one place to the next. And it's like, where's the DNA? How come I can't see anything? It was just the most futuristic environment. And what was so fascinating for me was sort of realizing that those design competencies that I had been developing to navigate this field had a place actually within a commercial context for companies like Ginkgo and beyond to start thinking about how design was so integral to how they thought about their mission and its implications into the real world. And so it was really clear to me that that was a great time when I came back to start to found Faber Futures, because I really wanted to create a context through which we could understand the role design plays in a field like biotechnology and beyond.
Before we dive into what you're doing at Faber Futures, I'm so curious, your pathway through your education and just like your curiosity, just not something you typically hear. Generally speaking, a young person kind of goes into their college studies with certain interests and passions, and they don't make the big leaps that you have made. Could you tell us, do you think it was the circumstances of like you got the right professors kind of at the right time that allowed you to jump from this point to another point, from architecture to textiles to biology? Like, is it the environment or is it you? Like, to be able to connect the disconnected? That's a really creative, curious pathway that you've been on.
That's such a difficult question to answer because I think I was running away from architecture.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't enjoy my education much.
It's brutal.
It is. I mean, I took the good stuff and I left the bad stuff. But there was something actually about the rigor that creates an entrepreneurial sense of the world, that your job is to be interested in something and to convince all stakeholders to come on that journey. That's what the weekly crit does to you. The sense of almost to the point of being obnoxious that you got to listen to what I have to say and I'm going to listen to your critique and then I'm going to show up again next week. I think that there is something in me that I will take ownership for that is a strong sense. I think I have a good sense of where a strategy might pay off and that you do need some signals while you're pursuing that. And it is very helpful to have the right people show up in your life at the right time. And so coming to Central St. Martin's from what was a male-dominated, short on ideas kind of an architectural environment, it was breathtaking to suddenly be surrounded by the opposite, which was faculty of radical women who were pioneers in their own right, just demonstrating how it was just possible to just do the work you want to do without having to answer to anybody. And so that came precisely the time that I needed it to then carry forward a sense of purpose about how I was going to configure my career moving forwards. And I remember at my graduate project celebration, I went to one of my tutors and now dear friends, Caroline Till, and I said to her in a panic, maybe 2 years too late, so what jobs can I get? And she looked at me and she was like, oh, your job doesn't exist. You have to go and create it. And it really depends what kind of a person you are, how you receive that information, but it took so much pressure off. I was so relieved when I heard that message. I don't think I applied for many jobs after, because in my mind, I was kind of like, well, so what's the practice? And how do I commit to that? That was more the concern is, what's the practice? What do I need around me to commit to that? But she was, again, the right sentence, right message at the right time.
So we want to talk about how you started your company, Faber Futures. But before we do that, maybe we could just go through a little terminology, because I think if we're guessing part of our audience is like Aaron and I, who are very curious but unfamiliar about
not a biologist.
Technologies. Yes, right, exactly.
Me neither.
So yeah. Well, you know more than we do, that's for sure. So could you talk us through a little bit about biodesign, biophilic design, how bacteria and fungi and algae can help us create and design different types of materials we can design with?
Sure. So biodesign is a term that sort of evolved or emerged after a number of different practitioners were experimenting with biological processes to rethink materials. I'm not a fan of the definition, and I can expand upon it a little bit later, but it is a helpful terminology. The design of, with, from biology to rethink how we create materials, products, and even services. And that can look like a microbe that creates pigment. And so you might design a process to sequester that pigment to use it in food as an ingredient or textiles as a dye compound. And I think another great example that feels very tangible and accessible is mycelium. So fungi are maybe the hero biodesign kind of material people tend to be drawn to. They create in their root systems what is known as mycelium, and it turns out it has some pretty incredible material properties, from sound insulation to fire retardant. And so you're starting to see a whole host of different kinds of biological processes that can be incorporated in how we think about designing textiles, designing fragrances, designing building envelopes even. And the key question then is, how do you take that small scale, lab scale intervention and scale it for it to have the impact that you hope it does in the real world? And I should say why we want to see these technologies scaled is because they are so critical to our divestment from fossil fuels. Most of the materials that we live with day to day are dependent on fossil fuels. And so for us to move on from this dependency, we do have to find new ways of creating the materials that we need for the lives that we live. And so biology has these incredible building blocks that allow us to think now about how we incorporate billions of years of evolution into systems that can be deployed at scale to attend to some of the crises that we're following. So biodesign is really trying to bring together what's happening in the lab and how this lives in the real world and the value proposition there. And I think what is maybe missing from our understanding of biodesign and what we're really focused on at Faber Futures is, how do we expand that value proposition, since we are also creating new supply chains in the process? Can biodesign be something that not only enables us to find new materials for the things that we make, but build more sustainable and ethical supply chains in the process? Can biodesign also offer us the context upon which we might think of circular design? So yes, amazing material and it has all of these benefits, but the end product that you've actually made, is it circular in of itself? Can those materials be repurposed? And so there's a tip of the iceberg, which is we're designing with living systems and to address biodiversity and climate challenges. But then because we are working with what is super nascent technology, where we have the opportunity to build from scratch, there's an opportunity to think about, from a systems perspective, what else needs to be true, such that biotech isn't just about materials, it's about human and planetary flourishing.
We'll return to the conversation after this quick break.
Support for Design Better comes from our friends at CrashPlan. Visit crashplan.com/designbetter for 50% off your first year of CrashPlan. From my daughter's first birthday to my son's first soccer game, if you're like me, you have thousands of precious family photos that only exist in digital form. That's why I've been using CrashPlan for a decade and a half now to back up all my important files. CrashPlan works efficiently in the background while you work, encrypting and sending all your new or changed files up to their secure cloud server every 15 minutes. And they make it simple to restore some or all of your data. And with unlimited version retention, CrashPlan can also be your ultimate rewind button. Businesses of all sizes benefit from CrashPlan's multi-tenant capabilities. Buy as many user licenses as you need and easily manage them all under one account. Go to crashplan.com/designbetter for 50% off your first year of CrashPlan. That's crashplan.com/designbetter, all one word, for 50% off your first year. Back up better with CrashPlan.
Support for Design Better comes from Uplift Desk, creators of office furniture designed to help you work better and live healthier. It's been estimated that the average person will spend 1/3 of their life at work. Sobering, huh? That's roughly 90,000 hours at work over your lifetime. Imagine what happens to your body if you're working with bad posture and poor circulation. It can be devastating on your health. That's why Eli and I love Uplift Desk and their ergonomic desks and chairs. Uplift Desk makes solid, well-constructed standing desks that you can customize to match your workspace. And they have a wide variety of incredibly ergonomic chairs. My personal favorite is the Human Scale Freedom Chair. I'm sitting in it right now. For professionals like us, investing in the right tools, especially our desk and chair, is essential. You're going to get free shipping, free returns with free return shipping, and an industry-leading 15-year warranty that covers the complete desk. Eli and I love their products, and we know that you will too. Give it a try. Go to upliftdesk.com and use code DesignBetter5 for 5% off your order. That's UPLIFT desk.com to get 5% off your entire order with promo code DesignBetter5. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When we spoke with Seth Godin on Design Better, he said something very interesting. Everyone's got a noise in their head. You, me, your boss, everyone. That noise in our head is self-doubt, confusion, fear, anxiety, all of that. It's part of the human experience, and it can hold us back. Therapy is one of the best ways to work through it all, to quiet the unproductive noise and develop positive mental health. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be convenient, flexible, and to work with your schedule. BetterHelp can help you get the support that you need. Visit betterhelp.com/designbetter today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/designbetter. And now, back to the show.
So, on that topic of a sort of circular economy, have you heard of the company called Shellworks by
Yes.
chance? Okay, so one of my former students in the design program where I teach is a co-founder of the company, and I've been following them a little bit, and their kind of pioneering idea seems to be this idea of they both make the material from microbes and unmake it from microbes. So there's a possibility with these materials, unlike plastics or many others, it goes even beyond recyclability into something that just works its way back into the ecosystem. Yeah, just curious on your perspective on that, and if other materials that are on that same pathway.
I think Shellworks is a really good example of companies that, because they are biology first, are starting to recognize that biotechnology is an opportunity for us to also think about regenerative practices by virtue of the fact that they're dependent on biological systems that can decay. That's a good thing. Then we have this opportunity to think, okay, what is the life cycle of this product? And how do we make sure that we are building the infrastructure as part of this promise to be able to go fully circular? So I'm really excited about companies like Shellworks because they're showing us what's possible, and they start to highlight that the fact that there isn't actually a one-size-fits-all across the board, that different kinds of biological inputs have different contexts. And so everyone's circular journey is going to be very different as a result.
So tell us a little bit about Faber Futures and what you and your team are doing right now.
So Faber Futures, as I said, was founded in 2018, and we exist to bridge design that is happening at a molecular scale with design for the real world. And that looks like really focusing on how you bring design and culture upstream into the biotechnology stack. And so to be able to do this is a bit of a systemic endeavor. We work across a wide range of sectors to achieve it, from institutions to startups and industry, as well as brands, to close the loop on the innovation and how it proliferates into the world. And that looks like working with the World Economic Forum, for example, to develop a multi-stakeholder engagement strategy to open the door on who gets to have a say on our biological futures, which is something that isn't necessarily at play within institutional bodies like the Forum, to working with a company like Ginkgo Bioworks to develop a residency program, again, to bring designers into an environment that would otherwise not prioritize engagement on that level, and designing and calibrating that engagement in such a way that it is equitable for the designer and their priorities, as well as for the company, with the hope that there's a real understanding about why design can be brought in early and not just to put lipstick on a pig after you finish making your product. And then we also have our own R&D. And I think this is something that I really learned from Material Futures, which is to know what you're talking about, you've got to be in it. You need to have a little bit of skin in the game. And so with our microbial dye technology, we use it as a vehicle in many different contexts to really push the R&D, the kinds of questions that need to be asked of this field in a way that's much harder to do if you're a startup. And so that might look like funding from Innovate UK, which is the UK government's funding body for innovation. We are working on a project currently funded by Innovate UK to find alternative feedstocks for the microbes that we are growing so that we're not dependent on virgin sugar from the Amazon to power this industrial revolution. That's the paradox, right? And or we might be commissioned by the Design Museum in London as an institution because they want to bring the complexity of this world to a much, much broader audience. And so they might commission us to make a film to talk about the work that we're doing. So we're finding multiple different strategies to do the work and with a range of different stakeholders to effect it. And more recently, we've launched a project called Normal Phenomena of Life, which I'm really excited about because it's maybe the first prototype that we've been able to develop in the studio that starts to showcase the systems view on biotechnology that we have been talking about and tinkering at in many different small contexts.
So Natsai, I wanted to ask a little bit more about normal phenomenon of life. And we were also curious about the design process. And it sounds like you work very much hand in hand with research and development and researchers in general, and don't just try to like put that stuff at the end of the process, but it becomes in the very beginning. So maybe we could kind of walk through the design process when you're starting to create new products at somewhere like Normal Phenomena of Life.
So Normal Phenomena of Life is a biggie for us because it is the design project, and then it's made up of multiple other projects to make it possible. I'll just give a brief overview about it and then maybe go into sorts of strategies that we've employed in sort of making it happen. So we spent the pandemic years thinking about what the role of design is and started to chat with our long-term collaborators at Ginkgo about where that possibility space rested and to what extent we could find a way to start prototyping some of these features. And we alighted on Normal Phenomena of Life. At the time, obviously, we didn't have a name for it, but we wanted to figure out a way to showcase the potential of biotech, not just as product-oriented, but for its capacity to create real change, systemic change. And so the idea of a retail platform that showcased products made with biotechnology was really fascinating for us to explore, knowing that those products didn't exist. And so we had the double job here to bring those products into existence, which is where it got really interesting, because that's when we realized that we would be creating new supply chains that could embody the kinds of values and incentives that we had been exploring insofar as what does a just transition enabled by biotechnology look like? How do we make biotech equitable? How do we upstream design into our understanding of the potential of biotechnology to guide us to ask the right questions about what we want these technologies to become, but to make it fun, to make it beautiful, because we understand that beauty is a fundamental human right, and that without beauty, there are no incentives to make the revolution irresistible, right? Because what we want is for people to demand that we change the incentive structures around how innovation happens in order to make our biological futures more livable. And so we designed a retail platform with our collaborators at Studio Airport and September Digital, which is a very beautiful, engaging visual world. We really understood our job there as being world builders. But on the back end, we designed the context and the conditions through which we could begin to collaborate with different biotech companies who are making amazing materials with their technologies, connect them with designers, craftspeople, artists to be translators of their work, with the hope that if you brought those two worlds together, you could start to generate high fidelity prototypes, demos of what the future holds and across this value chain. And so there was no blueprint, I think, for what we were doing. So in terms of our design process, it was very much leaning into Adrienne Marie Brown's notion of the emergent strategy. You know the destination, you know who you're taking with you, and through trust and patience, you're on that journey. And I think that was a very useful point of knowledge for us going into this process. We had to convince biotech companies to work with us in a way that was outside of their core business, outside of their remit, outside of their interest areas even, and figure out the best models to create to attend to their priorities. And so in some cases, we became their customer and we would simply ask them to send us material, but to also engage with us on the storytelling of what we were going to create so that they could be collaborators in some shape or form to the project. And then I suppose what was really fun for us, given that we have the microbial dye technology in-house, is that we had full control of what was happening in the lab and could model what we mean when we say you can upstream design into that environment to determine what happens there. And what that looked like was my entire team working across fermentation to fashion design to pattern cutting and building the collaborators around all of those things and iterating in real time across all of those things to arrive at the best possible scenario of a product at the end. And a product that is efficacious and to the extent that we can share with the consumer the claims that we're making about the value of that product, that it is water efficient in the dye process that it has relied upon, and that it is color fast, and so on, and that the pigments are toxin free.
This is fascinating. I mean, it's a different way of designing where you have to create the space. You have to bring the participants to the table to see the potential before you can really kind of push things forward. Convincing biologists that this is a new commercial application, convincing a brand, let's say it's Adidas or something like that, this is something that they could be bringing to their customers. That's also a really compelling value proposition that could sell their products better. How do you pitch this to big brands?
I don't know. we're kind of in the process. I won't talk about that too much right now because we are literally in the thick of it. What I will say is when we thought about who are we designing for, it was really clear to us that we are creating a direct-to-consumer storefront. And so we really have to focus on who that consumer is, but that the value that we are creating, particularly on the back end, is going to be so important for policymakers to understand and to learn from what we are learning, which is this is what biotechnology looks like, feels like, smells like. This is how regulatory standards determine what's available in your region versus what's not available. That's a fascinating learning for us. We're just about to open the US store, and there are certain things that we are able to sell in the US that we would not be able to sell in the UK store. And it just makes it very transparent for everybody to see without anyone needing to read a white paper. We really do see policymakers as key stakeholders to what we have created. We also see normal phenomena of life as a valuable piece of infrastructure for the biotechnology community, many of whom are startups and are thinking about what does 10 years look like. And if we can help them understand the use cases of their technologies and ground it from the start in design and with a consumer's mindset in mind, even if their business model is B2B, this is such an important muscle for them to exercise in a way that is de-risked, because they're not being invited to incorporate all of this intelligence and know-how into their own company at this early stage. And so it feels like the value proposition of normal phenomena of life is incredibly multifaceted, primarily because we are learning and we are sharing our learnings across the value chain about the implication space that is at play right now.
Is there anything right now that's particularly inspiring to you? And it could be within your world of biodesign and these new materials, or it could be something totally non-work related, a Netflix show you love, a book you're reading, a podcast you're enjoying, anything like that.
I'm learning a new language right now. I moved to Norway during the pandemic and have finally settled down into things and decided to learn Norsk because my daughter speaks fluent Norwegian, 2-year-old Norwegian for sure, but fluently. And I'm finding the experience of learning a new language incredibly humbling and inspiring, because it's like, yeah, how do we keep learning and how do we keep open to it? How do we exercise that muscle? But what it reveals about the place that I live and the culture of the people who are now my neighbors is really fascinating. And, you know, for anyone who doesn't know, Norway is the Norwegian national identity is really rooted in nature. And there's a profound appreciation and respect for the living world, never mind the contradiction of the oil and gas, but in how it envisages itself. It's this connection, deep-rootedness to nature. And I feel that to get to the heart of that, despite the fact that I live 20 minutes away from beautiful forest, that this language somehow begins to unlock more of the embodiment of what it means to be connected to the living world. So yes, I want to be able to speak to my daughter, but I am inspired by its potential to reveal more of the geography that I currently find myself in.
That's wonderful. Natsai, where can people learn more about you and Faber Futures?
You can Google Faber Futures and you'll find our website. You can follow us on Instagram, and you can follow Normal Phenomena of Life on Instagram and wherever it is that you follow people. We're online. That's all I'll say about that.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode was produced by Eli Woolery and me, Aaron Walter, with engineering and production support from Brian Paik of Pacific Audio. If you found this episode useful, we hope that you'll leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to finer shows. Or simply drop a link to the show in your team's Slack channel. designbetterpodcast.com. It'll really help others discover the show. Until next time.